Hello, it's Troy Friend here from Microvello Cameras once again talking with Shelley Preston of Olympus. Today we're here to talk about time lapses, time-lapse videos, which is a really neat trick that you can do with your Olympus cameras. In the past, to do time lapses, it's required a lot of math, a lot of work, and a lot of a variety of skills. Modern Olympus cameras, though, have made it pretty darn easy for just about anyone to make time lapses. It does take a little bit of finagling and a little bit of experimenting, but that's why we're here today. We're here today to hopefully help you cut down that learning curve that you will have in order to make good time-lapse videos. So to that end, Shelley and I are here, and we're going to get underway talking about time-lapse videos with Olympus cameras. Shelley?
All right, thank you, Troy. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, so we're going to talk about some time lapse, and Troy had a really good intro here. I would like to say, just starting out, this photography in general is all like a learning process. So I've learned a lot along the way. I still have some things to learn about time lapse. It can feel overwhelming once you start to understand that there are equations involved, there's math involved, but the good news is, like, we're gonna go over some of that, but the good news is that Olympus cameras do it for you. They do the math for you. So yeah, let's get started. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys and talk about time lapse, which is a good project for right now. It's a good project for any time, really.
I agree.
All right, so we're gonna start out with a time lapse that Troy made here. I'll show you here of the sky. So this is what we're talking about. Multiple photos into a video.
Bam, that's so fast. Okay, and I do want to chime in with that little short time lapse that we saw. That was the time lapse that I wanted to go much longer, but it does bring up our first most important lesson about time lapse photography, which is make sure your battery has a full charge on it. I foolishly didn't check.
Oh, is that what?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great time lapse. So to begin, let's answer the question, what is time lapse? So it's a series of images taken at a designated interval that is set by you and put together in a video in its final form. So it's often used to show a lot of time passing, but in a condensed version, in a shorter clip. Another way to look at it is that it speeds up time. Like, it's like you push the fast forward button on time. And it allows for the human eye to experience something that otherwise would be too slow to notice. Like, you can do time lapse of little seedlings blooming or flowers blooming, and oftentimes those happen too slowly for us to really be able to experience. We can notice it, but we don't actually experience that. So another time lapse example here by Troy.
And with this particular time lapse, my girlfriend and I went out on the rocks here at Port Washington, and I told her, we've got 5 minutes, just keep moving around on the rocks, just keep moving around. And so the smokestacks behind us and the clouds above us all sort of worked pretty well to give us a neat little time lapse there.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it shows the passing of time well. So what tools and what gear is needed for this kind of project? You will need a camera and a lens, a tripod, or some sort of stabilized base. A tripod is going to be your best bet, in my opinion, for this, because if you just set it on a ledge or something, it could shift. It could pick up the vibrations of the earth, even, you know. And tripods are generally designed to reduce that. Charge batteries. That's very important. Like Troy said, make sure your batteries are charged. You can use, in some of our newer cameras, the AC charger in place of that if it's plugged into a wall. A fast memory card, I would say a high capacity so that you don't run out of memory. That would be the worst. And then an ND filter might be helpful if you're shooting in the bright daylight, so you can take some of that light away.
And Shelley, could you just briefly describe what an ND filter is for people who aren't familiar?
Oh yeah, sure. It's a neutral density filter that comes in different uh, darknesses. There's probably a better, more professional way to say that. But it slows the absorption of light. So it's a filter that screws onto the front element of your lens and reduces the amount of light transmission. So they come in different, they call them stops, anywhere from a 2 to 10 stop. You can get a variable also that you can twist. It's two polarizers put together and you can twist. But yeah, so there's a lot of different options there.
Thank you. Mhm.
But the main idea is to slow the absorption of light. That's really the main thing there. Some checkpoints that I think are important to think about before you go out and make a time lapse. Take some test shots. Make sure that all the parameters that you set are working to your expectations. Exposure checks. Make sure that your exposure is, not overexposed or too underexposed or something like that. Check your composition. Make sure your horizon level is straight because you don't want to have to go in and correct 800 photos of a crooked horizon.
And again, too, I'd point out that it is one of the great points of the Olympus cameras there too, is it makes it that they've got two different levels inside the viewfinder, so you can really easily get your camera lined up. Makes it quite helpful. And two, regarding what Shelley said about the exposure checks, I usually use aperture priority when I'm doing a time lapse, and I don't want to say, well, once you start the time lapse, there's no further tweaking of your camera settings. So yeah, so like she said, you definitely have to be aware of what you want the camera to do, because once you hit go, that's it. You can't change anything.
That's a good point. Thank you. We already went over batteries charged, but obviously that's a really important part in the memory space, so we're saying it again.
Yes, that one bears repeating.
It does, yeah. There's nothing more disappointing than having a dead battery and you can't do what you want to do.
Right.
It's happened. You could also choose to put an Olympus art filter on it, make it a little more fun. Like dramatic tone, if you're shooting a sky, might be fun. In what direction is the movement of whatever is happening, and does it complement the composition?
Very important.
Yeah, clouds are moving. Like that one of your video of the smokestacks. They were moving in a certain direction, and it added to it because it was coming into the frame. Also, you can think about what kind of time-lapse projects you can do with kids. If you want to, make a project to teach kids a little bit more about photography or being creative, you can think about that kind of thing. Like you could plant a seed and wait for it to grow, and just something like that. Different things.
I could see families, if they've got to do like an at-home homeschooling type of art project, even doing a little time lapse of like a Lego building getting built, or a Lego Star Wars toy getting built or something, could make a pretty cool time lapse.
That's a really good idea. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
That would be more engaging than I think the plant growing, because they might lose interest because you have to wait every 10 minutes for that. Anyway. And then I put in here, do you have another camera to keep you occupied? So this is going to take some time in real life, even though the video is going to be short and very, very short. It's going to take some time to take all these pictures. Could be up to 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're doing. So.
Honest to goodness, can I chime in there briefly?
Yeah.
The challenging thing I've found in doing these time lapses is tied into what Shelley just said. Though the videos you might create might only be 10 seconds to a minute long, the time it takes to capture all the photos might be many hours. Like 2 weeks ago, I went out to try and do a sunset thing. I had the camera running for an hour and a half. For an hour and a half. So honest to God, I set up like a little walking route near my camera, and I just walked my route to get my steps in for the day in the middle of this park, not getting too far away from my camera for an hour and a half, because I didn't bring another camera with me or a book or something.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Get those steps in.
Exactly.
So in the Olympus cameras, these are some questions you will have to answer. When do you want to begin shooting? So do you want it to delay a little bit? How many shots you want it to take? How often you want it to take the photo? And this is also referred to as interval time. It's the time between shots. And if you'd like the camera to create the movie for you, you can choose yes or no. If you do choose yes, it will create the movie for you, but you will also still have all the individual frames that it took in case you wanted to do some post-processing and change it up a little bit. And you'll choose your resolution and frame rate. Okay, so choosing frame rate. I'm gonna be honest, this has been really tough for me to completely understand. So don't let this freak you out. Don't let it scare you away from just trying it, because the camera does all this math for you. But yeah, Troy and I will talk about it right here. So if you choose 5 frames per second, it makes your transitions appear more choppy. The more frames per second, it will look a little bit smoother to the human eye.
Right.
Um,
Can I just chime in again and say that,
yeah,
when we watch movies or when we watch videos, those run around 24 to 30 frames a second. And that's the frame rate um, at which our eyes perceive smooth motion. So that's why, again, any frame rate that you choose, the closer it is to that 24 to 30 range, the more smooth the video is going to appear to us. Whereas when you slow down the frame, like we say here, it's a bit more choppy, a bit more chunky, a bit more dramatic in the transitions between pictures. So choosing frame rate is definitely an important creative choice in what kind of time lapse you're making.
definitely. It also is a component to the equation that's used to calculate the different things. So the more frames per second, the shorter the entire length, or the shorter the length of the final film will be. The fewer frames per second, the longer the length of the film will be. So here, the time a final video equals the number of photos divided by the frames per second. So this is something that you would have to calculate if you wanted your final video to be a specific time. But now the camera does it for you.
So very helpful. I know, Shelley, that like when I've done it in the past, I usually have gone out with a particular length of time that I want my video to be. So like when I'm changing my settings on the camera, I'll go back and forth on the different screens. I'll change the settings and then go back and see how long it's going to be. Go change it again and keep on tweaking it until I get the right amount of time that I want. And it's so nice that the Olympus, again, does the multiplication and division for me.
Yeah, it really does. It's because, certain things, you need the final length to be a certain length for different applications, right? So there's a video that I did that you'll see here in a minute. I needed it to be pretty short. I needed it to be in between 15 and 20 seconds. And I didn't have to do the math. I just plugged in different numbers and got it to 19 seconds. And that was perfect for what I needed. So, yeah.
Very cool.
All right. Oh, here it is. This is so I filmed this at full HD at 30 frames a second. Oh, sorry.
You're all right.
I clicked the wrong thing. So yeah, here's a photo of me painting. I think it's a total of 19 seconds. And I believe that I used my interval here at about 7 seconds. And so even though it's 30 frames per second, the interval also has to do with how smooth or how choppy something looks because of the rate that I'm moving or the rate that a subject is moving as well, like cars, something like that.
Yeah, it's all very good.
So what makes a good subject for a time lapse? There are a lot of different things that you can do depending on what you want to do. So changing skies, that's always a popular one, I think, for time lapse. Sunset, sunrise, some storms, like with lightning even, I think would be cool. Some passing clouds. Night skies and star movement, that can also be done with time lapse. Some high traffic areas, like Grand Central Station or traffic. Creating artwork like I did. That's what I do when I'm not photographing and teaching and all the other publications I have. Growing plants. Mushrooms are one because I think mushrooms grow fairly quickly, right? Like they one of our visionaries, Peter Baumgarten, does some on the time lapse on mushrooms. He also does other time lapse things, which are really great. It's a good resource, which is at the end of this. And then a flower opening to the sun. Like if you go out in the early morning, I know sunflowers especially, they'll kind of be like tilted down, and then the sun comes out and then they move over and open up to the sun. So that's something that you can capture with it. Anything to add, Troy?
Well, one that did just come to mind actually is the fact that, you're down in Chicago. I'm up here in Milwaukee. Both of us live on the Great Lakes on Lake Michigan. And so once the marinas are more active and stuff as well, again, anything that has movement. So setting up by a marina and watching all the boats come and go over over a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that could be probably pretty cool.
That's such a great idea. I didn't think of that. That's in the summertime. That's what my dog Jax and I do. We just go down to the lake and watch the sailboats.
There we go. Yeah.
That's a good. I'll have to add that in here. So just some parameters to get you started. In Olympus cameras, you can use time lapse in the program mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, and manual modes. Typically, you can choose between 1 and 999 shots. I noticed that in our new EM1 Mark III, you can go up to 9,999 shots, which is basically 10,000 shots, a lot. So there are limitations. You can't really combine it with some of our other features like live ND or bracketing HDR multiple exposure. So just so you know that if you have live ND engaged, then you're not going to be able to turn on time lapse as well. You do have the option of connecting your Wi-Fi to use it as a wireless remote to start. If you did not want to press the button for camera shake, which is also one of the reasons why you would want to delay the shot earlier. I don't think we mentioned that in the start time. You can delay that so that you don't have the camera shake from where you're pressing the button, the shutter button. And then again, choose to have the Olympus camera formulate the movie for you or not. So either way, you're going to get the individual images.
Right.
So I've got some screen captures here of where to find the time lapse in your Olympus camera, just to simplify it as much as we possibly can for you. We want to be creative and not have to worry about like figuring it all out, right? So if you press the menu button and it is under camera 1, and then it'll say interval shooting / time lapse. There, in some of our cameras, it'll look more like this with the just the stacked rectangles. And then once you hit the right arrow key to go into this menu, then you'll see interval shooting time lapse, just to reduce some confusion there, that yours might not look exactly like this. It might look like this.
As long as it's, it's always on the first camera menu, and that's something I really value because it makes it so easy to get to.
Definitely, yeah, it does. And so you'll hit the right arrow key down to on and highlight on, and before you just hit OK to turn time lapse on, you see the little arrow to the right. That means there's more options to the right, so you'll hit the right arrow key, and then here's where you can choose the number of frames. Go up and down. You have all these options. Your start waiting time, which is what we were just referring to, like, do you want to delay it 5 seconds? Do you want to delay it 10 seconds? I think, Troy, you said earlier that you delayed it for quite a bit of time one time so that you could.
Well, you can. You can, depending upon what sort of time lapse you're making. Yeah, you might have stuff that you need to get ready to be a part of the time lapse even. So yeah,
Mm,
the having the delay is a useful thing, but most of the time it's usually only a few seconds or so for me.
yeah, same here. Um, you can even, yeah, here we go. You can even delay it hours, minutes, seconds. So your choice. Interval length. This is where you can choose how often the camera will take a picture and while you're making this. But you can go from seconds to minutes to hours here as well. This is where you choose to turn the movie to have the camera make the movie for you or not. So it's just on or off. Record only still pictures or record still pictures and make the time-lapse movie. Movie settings, here's where you can choose your movie resolution, 4K, HD, and your frame rate. You have, the newer cameras have the option of the 30 frames per second, 4K, and so yours, depending on what model that you have, if you don't have the M1 Mark III, which is fine, you can still create a ton of creative things with this. You might see like 15, 10, 5 frames per second.
Right.
And here is another time-lapse example by Troy.
Now, so this one again was about trying to show how the different frame rates impact how long your video is. So note that they get quick, they're all 5 minutes of time, but depending upon the frame rate, how long the video is changes. So this 5 frames a second was a rather long video, but by the time we get to 10 frames a second, and then 15 frames a second, it gets a lot shorter. So yeah, the each of those little vignettes was a 5-minute time lapse, but the length of the video changed because of how many frames per second I was compiling into the movie. So,
5 minutes in real life, like of your time.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So it took, say 16 minutes to make those 3 lapses, for the little bit of time it took in between each
Yeah.
one to go in and change the frame rate from 5 frames per second to 10 frames per second to 15 frames per second. Yeah.
All right. So here are some kind of guidelines or basically starting points for different kinds of subjects and what kind of intervals that you might want to choose for these things. And yeah, so they're just starting points. Like fast moving traffic, maybe your interval is 1 second. Sunsets and sunrises between 1 and 3 seconds, and then all the way down to if you wanted to make a time lapse of construction, something being built, 5 to 15 minutes. So they're just guidelines, and it's up to you to be creative and make it your own. There are so many different options here to express what you want to express. I think it's great.
I do think, if we want to go a little bit old school, we can bring Ansel Adams into this even, and how he always talked about, the importance of pre-visualization. Before he'd set up his camera, he knew what he wanted that picture to look like. So I think also when we're talking about time lapses, that's just important too. We have to be thinking about what do we want that little video snippet to look like, and then sort of what do you call it, reverse engineer from that to figure out what we need to do to make it look like that. So yeah, the realm is wide open. You can do a lot of creative stuff with time lapses. It's just up to all of us to keep playing at it.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay. Here are a couple of resources. One of them I mentioned earlier, Peter Baumgarten, one of our visionaries, Creative Island Photo. He has a blog and talks more about time lapse and where you can kind of read about it, have a different perspective, have somebody else saying it in their own words, because when something is a bit hard to grasp, sometimes it's good to hear 2 different viewpoints and how one person explains it and how somebody else explains it can resonate with different people. So I highly recommend you check him out. There's also at the Learn Center at getolympus.com. We have a Home with Olympus section there, and there's a lot of creative resources and things that you can do for right now while we're at home. And we can end on another time lapse, which this is Milwaukee, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I was out down in the neighborhood of Bayview with the what was it, the EM10 Mark II and the 75 300 millimeter lens. I got out there hoping to get sunrise and see, you know, the city slowly get lit up over the course of an hour. But of course, you can see it was nothing but cloudy that day, which actually worked out really great though, because you saw so much movement in the clouds. So that was pretty great.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, well, first off, thank you very, very much, Shelley, again, for, you know, sharing your time and expertise here.
Of course, thank you.
Heck yeah, I know that we're going to have, well, we're going to meet up again in a couple days on Facebook to answer any questions that people might have about their beginning to explore with time lapse. And I was wondering too, I think I've got a few other time lapses that I've shot recently. Would it be okay if I showed those here as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, well,
Do you want me to stop share here?
yes, let's have you stop sharing.
Okay.
And I will.
Yeah, I'd love to see them.
Okay, let me see here. Um, okay, I think this will work. We'll see what happens here. Let me get this window. There we go. Oh yes, I don't think we saw this one. This was kind of fun. Again, just looking for subjects that show us some movement and things like that. You can see here again, EM10 Mark III with the 12 to 42.8 out in front of the Pfister Hotel in downtown Milwaukee. This worked out really great, seeing the clouds move in a different direction than the traffic. Looking down Water Street north, and again, we got to see a little bit of the clouds going. But an important thing there to note is that if you're going to try and do a time lapse of clouds moving, you got to make sure it's on a day when you've actually got significant definition within the clouds. Just a typical gray overcast day isn't going to work well. This one I thought turned out very well as well. I went down to the lakefront and turned on the dramatic tone art filter, which worked out really, really great.
I'm not seeing it on my end, Troy.
Oh, you're not?
I'm not. I don't know. Hopefully in the recording,
Yeah.
it's going to show because I think you're on recording on your end. But yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I'm very sorry to hear that because these are awesome time lapses.
I bet they are. Yeah, well, you know, you can send them to me and I'll look at them. So as long as everybody else can see them right now,
That's the important thing indeed. So,
yes.
Are you seeing just the time-lapse vids window?
Yes, like I see your little finder box there.
Okay, well then I want to try something different one more time then here. Because that's just a darn shame.
It is.
Let me just do this real quick. Put on the rocks. Yeah, because God darn it, there's a. Okay, I'm gonna try and share two more, and we'll see if these work out.
Okay.
Okay, yes, this should work better. Now I see what's going on. Okay, now you see that?
Yes. Oh, I see it. Got it.
Okay. So,
oh, wow.
where Shelley did some painting, I did some coloring.
Cool.
And it worked out pretty neat. So again, this would be the kind of assignment I could see, you know, somebody doing with their kids if they've got, you know, some at school homing to be doing. Could be kind of fun to sort of see that progress happening.
Definitely. Do you remember what your interval was on this one?
I think I set it for as little as like every 4 or 5 seconds.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. That's really cool.
So that one worked. And now one more again. Which one is this? Oh, wait, did I just grab the same one? Let me see here. Oh, yeah, I did. Sorry. Okay. Different one here. Okay, let's try this now. Yes, this one I was pretty happy with as well. At Water Park in Sherwood. And yeah, again, we get to see the waves going on. We get to see the clouds diminishing and growing and playing in the distance there. And it worked out kind of nice.
That's really cool. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So yeah, so playing with the time lapse feature of the Olympus cameras these past few weeks to sort of get ready for this little talk with you, Shelley, has been a lot of fun, and has forced me to use my creativity in ways that I haven't done before. So this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. So I think we're all set for today, yes. And
Yeah.
then like I said, I'll see you in a few days, and we'll
Okay.
answer any questions people might have, right?
All right. Well, cool. Thank you, Troy.
Thank
And
you,
thanks
Shelley.
for joining us.
Very good to see you again. Take care,
You
you.
too. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.